summer holidays. I won't make any quips about the weather, but seeing as we're back after the summer holidays, I'll just remind, I know you're all really au fait with this, but I'll just remind you really about the protocol for the meeting. We have got our colleague Paul online, so this will just remind Paul as well. So Paul, please keep your camera on, but keep yourself muted until, of course, you show us by raising the virtual hand that you wish to ask a question or have an observation. And for attendees in the chamber, if you wish to ask a question or make a comment when invited by myself, please press your microphone, which will turn green, and then I'll invite you in to speak. And at that time, your microphone should turn red. Okay. If any reason a member of the committee has cause to leave the meeting, they must indicate this to myself before leaving. There's no particular voting items on the agenda today, so we're okay as far as anybody needing to leave the meeting. Leader, we have tried. They're not working. Yes, we've had a bit of Blackpool illuminations this afternoon with lights on and off, but Jane and I tried unsuccessfully. We're not sure because it is a little bit dim up here. I hope you can see all your notes and writing, officers, but we'll get there. Okay. So, officially then, good afternoon, everybody. Prynawn da pawb. Welcome to the Learning Committee on Monday, the 9th of September 2024. And please note that this meeting may be recorded and broadcast via the authority's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes. So we'll move straight into agenda item number 1, and that is to receive any apologies. I have Councillor Claire Jones and Councillor Jamie Scrivens, if he can, is going to join us online a little bit later than the start. Agenda item number 2, just to remind everybody about any declarations of interest. So please, if you have any declarations of interest, let me know now. Oh, okay. In that case, then we'll move straight on to the agenda item number 3, which is the Forward Work Programme. Now, what I'm going to do is just give you a run through of the draft Forward Work Programme for the next cycle of meetings. And as you know, a planning meeting is held with myself, my Vice Chair, the Cabinet Member for Education, Director for Education as well, to review the suggestions from officers and from this committee. And as I mentioned to you all previously, it's a collection really of those statutory obligations for us as a scrutiny committee, but also where we've captured some items for committee to pick up in this next forward programme, and we've itemised those on the scrutiny plan. Also to remind everybody that we need to agree the forward work plan today, and that there are some gaps within the forward work plan, just because, as you know, as our conversations progress through the cycle, sometimes an item will come to our attention that we want to come back to further down the line, or we may have a resident referral or a referral from another stakeholder, another source that we may wish to include within the forward work plan. And so hence we keep some gaps in there to allow us to do that. Also to remind everybody that, as you know, outside of that forward work plan, we as a scrutiny really like to have some effective engagement. And so we do have a number of workshops as well throughout the year. Those ones include safeguarding, Ed Psych service, and obviously some feedback from Estin as well. So they sort of naturally progress throughout the annual cycle as well. Okay, and we always have that opportunity at the end of scrutiny to look at what we've discussed today to pick up on anything that we need to include in the next one. So when we look at the actual forward work plan and we bring ourselves obviously to Monday, the 9th of September, we have the items that we're going to discuss today. Just going to briefly run through it page by page. We then meet again on the 14th of October, where we're going to look at school catering facilities, libraries and museums. And then we meet again on Monday, the 25th of November, where we're going to look at school Estin inspection reports for all the schools across the LA, Dysgu and Gyfartha High School. We also have the Central South Consortia annual report to scrutiny on that date as well. On Monday, the 13th of January, we'll be looking back at community-focused schools and having some reflection and forward planning on that. And obviously there will be an additional report to be confirmed at a later date. So there's one of our opportunities to include an additional report there as we progress. Monday the 3rd of March, we have our attendance report and we have our ALN report, because we often find that those two work well together within the body of a scrutiny meeting as well. Monday the 7th of April, if you remember, we're going to talk about those partnership workings to understand really what the wider stakeholders are and wider meetings that sometimes we have. As chair of scrutiny, I attend those. Sometimes my vice chair will, but certainly cabinet member and obviously our director as well as other colleagues. And some of those include the EPP, the Education Partnership Panel, the CFS, the Community Focused Schools, the BETP. Don't we love all these little acronyms and little words that we use, to describe them? The Business and Education Together Partnership, and also the Welsh Education Partnership as well. And then last but not least, additional items for us to consider, as we said, review catchment areas of schools. We're going to be picking up on that at some point. Safeguarding, our education psychology service. And just as a reminder to everybody that in the last couple of months, we have had a self-evaluation workshop back on the 14th of May, because we are picking up on self-evaluation today as well. Okay. So we are looking forward. We do also have a number of task and finish groups that naturally evolve from our committee discussions. One of those we are already penciling in is math pupils. But of course, as I said, again, when we have our discussions, both in this meeting and via email or phone calls, there are other items that we may wish to bring up or have a task and finish group on. And also scrutiny visits. As colleagues will know, in the last 2 cycles, we've also done school visits and a college visit as well, which I'm sure, and I know that I had feedback from you guys as well, we found very beneficial, really, to make sure that we covered sort of all bases, if you like. So with regards to that, and just bear with me as I jump to my actual paper and agenda item, are there any questions with regards to the forward work plan, colleagues? No? Are there any comments with regards to the forward work plan? No? In that case, then, can I ask you to actually have a show of hands? And Paul, could you show me a virtual hand on the screen just to confirm that you are happy to accept that as our forward work plan moving into the next cycle, please? So I can have a show of hands. And Paul, can you just let me know that you're happy as well, if that's okay? I wonder if Paul can hear me.
I think there's been an issue with Teams, hasn't it? And actually,
Okay, maybe we could just message him, guys, if we can, just see if he's okay. However, we have got enough colleagues in the room to actually pass that as accepted, Jane. Is that okay? Okie doke. Thank you. Right, and it was remiss of me. I forgot to remind you that we have some extra colleagues in the room joining us this afternoon. We have, of course, our cabinet member and our director, but we also have Anthony Lewis, and we have our lovely Anne Harrod down there as well, joining us to discuss our Welsh report. So we'll move straight on to the next agenda item then, if that's okay with you, as that forward work plan was accepted. Agenda item number 4 is the WESP, the Welsh Education Strategic Annual Report. So we're going to receive an update on this report and the progress made against the WESP. It includes an appendix, which is the annual report to Welsh Government as well. And in that case, I'll hand over to both Sue and Harrod and our Cabinet Member as well. Okay, thank you, Cabinet Member and Leader Geraint.
Diolch yn fawr, Chair. Before I give members a summary of the report and ask for questions, I would like to thank all the officers who worked at Eisteddfod in Pontypridd this year. A very big thank you to Andrea May, our Head of Achievement and Wellbeing, for the organisation and planning for the event, which, for those of you who attended and for those of you who followed our social media platforms, I'm sure you will agree, was a successful promotion of the Welsh language activities within Merthyr Tydfil. Congratulations as well to Joshua Morgan, a teacher at Greenfield Special School, who was a finalist on the Welsh Learner of the Year award at this year's Eisteddfod. Josh illustrates his Welsh learning journey, and by now, more than 10,000 learners use sketchy Welsh illustrations and lessons. He has helped his class to create a Welsh learning book called Llais. He also creates a weekly video which with his class to teach Welsh to the rest of the school. Bendigedig pawb. Over to the report. The purpose of the report is to provide an update against the Welsh and Education Strategic Plan, which is a statutory document. The aims and expectations are set by the Welsh Government. The West drives the overall vision. Merthyr Tydfil, Shemairament, a county borough where the Welsh language is heard, spoken and celebrated through all walks of life. We are required to report the Welsh Government on the area annually. The Welsh Government provides a set of suggested questions and areas to respond to in the report. There are 7 objectives, some shared with the Welsh Language Strategic Plan. Partners feed into this report through the processes we have in place, most notably the highlight reports from the subgroups. Other sources of information are utilised, as well as discussions with the various leads of each of the objectives. Points to note, we're in year 2 of the 10-year plan, which sets ambitious, challenging targets. As such, we're in the early stages of implementation of the plan, with a lot of the groundwork being laid to enable us to achieve our objectives and accompanying targets. The report gives some key highlights from each objectives area, building on last year's reporting. Further details on each of the objectives can be found in the appendix, which is in the annual report. Welsh Government will scrutinise and come back to us with a series of questions about our report. As you will see in the report, sound progress is being made against the 10-year plan, although some indicators are not yet where they need to be. I would like to draw members' attention to the following. The considerable work and effort from those involved to drive the agenda forward with limited resource. In March, our work was shared with others at the Cymraeg Pawb conference. The persistent creation of demand for Welsh medium education, the notion of build it and they will come, the setting up of a Saffel Gurnes has been successful, winning an award for Best Kilt Maithron. Engagement with a range of partners and organisations promote Welsh medium, is that it? WM?
Yes.
Welsh medium it's all these acronyms and stuff, is strengthening from early years upwards. Immersion work in the second Welsh medium schools is strengthening, ready to move this provision to the new Welsh medium primary school. As a result, children are able to access the curriculum where otherwise they would not. We have 5 schools interested in moving along the curriculum of language. We are developing our processes for this, with a focus on increasing the school capacity first and to research understanding the differences in the categories. Positive work is happening with the college for transitioning to AES level. There has been an increase in those applying for the Welsh course. 92% of schools have achieved Siarter Iaith. With all engaged in some way, Welsh medium schools both have received gold, and there is some collaboration between the Welsh medium and English medium to support each other. Community events are increasing positive with the Business Education Together partnership, CFS,
Community focused schools.
and community focused schools contributing to the work considerably over the last year. However, there are some key areas to focus. The capacity of the workforce needs attention, but with the new Welsh Education Bill being laid at the Senedd will mean changes needed in schools. Continued focus on early years, getting the children and families engaged early, strengthening partnerships to further increase opportunities across the community, partners leading rather than us, increased numbers of learners accessing and achieving high-level GCSE outcomes. Members, overdue for questions.
Thank you ever so much. And can we just note as well from scrutiny about Josh's achievement, that is fantastic. And can I also put on record as well that I did have the pleasure of visiting the Eisteddfod, and I have to say, I think our presence down there was fantastic, and the partnership working, with colleagues in other departments as well was really, really good. So if we can just note that as well. Excellent. Okay, colleagues, you've had an opportunity to read through the report and listen to what our cabinet member and leader has had to say. Are there any questions in relation to this report? Clive, I'll come to you first.
They've always been talking about Welsh secondary school. Has actually any progress been made in this? As far as I can see, the only way it could be done is if we combined with the Welsh school at Aberdare and use their staff, start off with year one and use their staff, combined. Has any work been actually done on this?
I think you're preempting what's coming to council over this municipal year. It is part of the Welsh Education Strategic Plan that in the first 5 years we would undertake a feasibility study to look into it. So Anthony's currently has done a lot of work on this, but it is coming to council later, and later in this municipal year, and there will be a workshop for all councillors. And is this before Christmas? We've got for all councillors. I can't remember when it is.
Yeah, so there's a number of aspects have been carried out so far. It's obviously a very complex area because there's no simple solutions to this. It involves us looking at what the long-term implications are for our numbers of secondary school places that are required and how we can best meet those places. Currently, the majority of our children are attending Ysgol Rhyd y Waun. So we've had discussions with RCT regarding the capacity within that provision to accommodate our needs over the long term. We've also had discussions with other neighbouring local authorities who are in a similar position to us with regards to having WESP targets, particularly around year one learners, and then the implications of meeting those WESP targets and what that would mean then for year 7 learners down the line. So we've had discussions with Blaenau Gwent in particular, looking at options for additional secondary provision, as well as us considering secondary provision within our own county borough, with an eye on the long-term needs for that provision. Now, those... No, but just to say, in terms of there's those areas that we're obviously considering, but we can't resolve this in isolation. And we've had discussions with Welsh Government as well, and Welsh Government have seen that nationally this is something they need to take a lead on. It's not something which individual authorities are able to resolve. And so as part of those discussions, we will be having a workshop with councillors, and that will be to consider the challenge really that we face and a range of potential solutions. And the purpose of that workshop wouldn't be to come up with any concrete answers, but just so that everybody is better informed as to the challenge and the range of potential solutions that we face.
Oh, thanks. That's nice.
Thank you. Sue and Anthony, would there be an opportunity that perhaps members of this scrutiny could also engage within that workshop or post that workshop?
Yes,
something similar.
This committee last year or the year before did feed in to the report that Anthony has actually put together. So I think yes, it would be, if we would definitely want engagement from this committee.
Thank you.
Certainly before there was any outcome.
Great.
Thank you both. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go to Jacob next time.
Shemai. I just wanted to talk about 5.11 and 5.14 in the report. Specifically, it mentions that that there seems to be a bit of a decrease from people both entering into Welsh secondary languages and GCSEs, and obviously gaining the qualifications. So for me, I was quite obviously a bit concerned about the shortfall of students, as I said, both entering and obtaining those Welsh language courses. And I was wondering if the council have been looking in sort of key areas of improvement, both within classes and communities, but also, as you mentioned, about the Business Education Together partnership and the community focus group contributing to those said areas. I thought maybe it'd be worth for the panel to know, maybe be given some examples of what they've done to try and improve engagement of the Welsh language, both, as I said, in the communities and schools.
I'll take the schools, and then I'll pass over to Angharad to answer the community aspects with BTP and CFS. I think last year we were disappointed when we actually looked at it, and there was one secondary school whose numbers were significantly down, but they are back up this year. After some conversations, they were back up. I think it is worth remembering that if a pupil has started in Rhyd-y-Waun in Welsh medium secondary school and then transfers for whatever reason to an English medium secondary school, they can't take the current Welsh language GCSE because the current one is for second language learners, and they would be counted as a first language learner. So whilst those numbers weren't, so that will count for some of the numbers being down, because we did have a significant number after COVID who transferred back to some of our secondary schools. We have looked at the number. We've done a specific piece of work with the college to improve the take up from GCSE to A levels. We have seen an increase this year, perhaps not as much as we would have wanted from that. So we will continue doing that work. But the college, as many of you will be aware, have got what they call their Shmirement room. So there is a culture of Welsh language in the college, and they are the first further education college to have actually received the Siarter Iaith. They've had the Silver Siarter Iaith Award. So we've done a lot of work with actually pushing that agenda with our schools. Andrea would be able to give far more information on the work that's been done on the curriculum group, but actually pushing the qualifications is a key work. But we've then got to take it up into the sixth, into further education. We can do the GCSEs. We need to ensure that the further education is taken up. So it is a work in progress, Jacob. But it's the results this year we were pleased with. They were up, but based on last year's information. But I'll hand over to Angharad now to talk about what the BTP and the community focused schools have done.
In terms of the BTP in March, there was an event with Merthyr College aimed at Welsh and businesses for the Penydre cluster, and Rhyd-y-Waun and Santa Stydfil, where there were a lot of businesses present to speak about the value of using Welsh within your business and within the employment. And then in March and June, we held 2 events in Ysgol Rhyd-y-Waun and Ysgol Santa Stydfil, where all Welsh languages businesses came together to speak to Year 6 pupils about the value and the importance of using Welsh in the workplace. And in relation to the community focused schools team, we work very closely with them for a range of engagement projects where there's been Welsh language lessons mynediad in entry level 1 being offered in Penydre and Ysgol Santa Stydfil. We hope that will continue in further years with continuity to the next level again. The community focused schools have been involved in big community events as well to promote the language in our Diwrnod Siamai and Welsh language Christmas Fair event. There's further projects on the go. Community focused schools are also involved in working with the Multiplay Adult Community Learning Team. I think there's a course starting next week, I believe, in Treharris Boys and Girls Club, a 10-week taster course, and worked with Community Focus School where an event took place in Nanllwynor Park, organised by Zoa and Community Focus Schools team on the weekend to use a bilingual walk and to encourage parents and the community to use the language.
Diolch yn fawr.
Oh, da iawn, Jacob. No problem at all. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to come to Anna next, then Jack, and then I'm going to go to my colleague, my vice chair, Gareth. So, Anna, over to you.
Thanks. Just to pick up on the point Clive made with regards to Welsh medium secondary school, is there a risk that the lack of Welsh medium secondary school in the borough becomes a figurehead for what success looks like within the WESP? And how can the wider body of work that has been done be better promoted to the community?
There will always be an element of why haven't we got a Welsh medium secondary school in Merthyr? But what we will work around is the positivity of all the other work that we're doing. And one of the the vision for the vision for not only our West but also for our Welsh language strategy is that Merthyr Tydfil is a county where the Welsh language is heard, spoken and celebrated throughout all walks of life. The fact that we've got 5 primary schools interested in going along the continuum, so actually become to be used in far more Welsh and almost have that bilingual aspect to their curriculum, I think is a positive. But there will continue to be, I'm sure, that political push. We'll see what happens, as Anthony said, when we bring the report to council, and we will no doubt have some quite significant discussions at that point, Anna, about the way forward for our learners.
Can I go on the back of that as well? I think it's just how the language has grown naturally in Merthyr over the years. I was one of the first of the intake into Ysgol Sant Ystadfer, way back in the 70s, Gareth, way back in the 70s. But, decision, that my parents made back then was, to send me then to Cyfarthfa Primary and through the Merthyr Schools network rather than go to Rhyd Felin. So I think it was a blessing when another second Welsh medium school went to Rhyd which was a much closer to home for children. And, we can see now by the uptake in the Welsh language in Merthyr how many children want to go there. I think what happened next, the cost of, sending those children, to Rhyd as we know, has grown massively over the last few years. And we will eventually get, some kind of Welsh medium secondary provision in Merthyr. What that will look like in the future is, let's see in that workshop in the year.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. When we go to the annual review report, Welsh in Education Strategic Plan, the one that's Andrea wrote and Sue approved, on page 7, at the bottom, there's a category called risks. And the first category in that is finance. Yeah, so I'm not sure who to ask it to, but what additional risks are involved by finance in Welsh medium education? And can it be explained, and is it over and above that which English medium education has? What actually does the finance risk look like?
I think if you're actually looking, I'm just looking at where that sits in the report, Jeff, because it sits under outcomes. It sits under outcome 1, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. So if you're actually looking, it's would be the cost, because you as you grow a Welsh medium provision, mm-hmm. you've got a very high. Now I'm going to get this the wrong way around, don't you? You've got small numbers of pupils to a teacher, whereas in our it's 1 to 30, 1 to 29. Anthony's going to tell me now. 1 to 29 in primary schools. Yeah. So it's 1 to 29. Maximum you can have in a foundation learning class, as you know, is 30. But if you actually look at Safle Gurnus at the moment, whilst you still need a teacher in front of those children, the numbers are very small. So it's the cost of as the school grows. It's the cost of the teaching staff, the cost of the LSAs that you still need within that. It's the same in our early years settings. They tend to be smaller numbers. You need the ALN infrastructure as well to be able to support that. So whilst the demand is growing, the finance is quite high. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm presuming that you said earlier on you were doing, to either Clive or Anna, that you're doing a feasibility study at some point
The
in the near
feasibility
future?
study, we're working on the feasibility study. It has been completed, but it needs updating. So that includes the finance. And I think what Anthony will explain when we do the workshop is how, what's the longitudinal look at Welsh language education, because if you think of a secondary school as well, you've got to think of the curriculum offer for the children as well. So if you've got a small, it's not like a primary school where one teacher teaches everything. You need the curriculum's expertise in a secondary school. So you've got to look at the cost of that and where's the right time to actually come in, with that growth and with that, because it does cost a lot of money for a seedling school.
And I get that totally, but sometimes there's a need to expend. I know Anthony won't like that, but there's a need to expend early in capital terms and infrastructure terms, because then you can then bring in perhaps pupils from other areas into this area to offset the costs. So whilst you're doing your feasibility study, can I just suggest gently that you don't forget that side of things, even if it's in a 10-year or a 15-year plan?
And if we go back to where we are with the primary, so whilst we've got 3 Welsh medium settings, primary settings. The third Welsh medium setting, which is on the Gurnos, is actually governed by Ysgol Santes Tydfil, which kept the costs down because we didn't have to go out for a new head teacher. We didn't have to secure another governing body, although there's no cost to that, but we didn't have to look at that. So that's why we've managed to keep the costs down there whilst we actually grow the schools. So it's something that we are very mindful of as we're moving forward.
May I add something to that as well? I think, this strategy is the Welsh Government strategy for the 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. We're only, 26 years away seems a long time, but it'll come along very quickly. And when you think that our population isn't going to grow, massively over that period of time, so you're looking at the same children that might be English medium provision now that would be in Welsh, and even the teachers will have to learn the language to be able to teach in Welsh. So I think we're going to go over a massive period of change if we're going to hit that strategy by 2050. Huge pressures on everybody, from local authorities, Welsh Government, and the teachers themselves and the children. So I think it's there's a lot of work to be done between now and then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Gareth, did you want to ask a question? You okay?
Yeah, we're moving on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I'm going to. Okay, I'll go to the Vice Chair a second, to Gareth, and then officers, can you show me the chat? Thank you, and I'll just read through as Gareth is asking his question.
Yeah, thanks, Jez. Just 2 questions from myself. 5.15, comments on the opening of an LRB from the next academic year. Where will that be?
The LRB will be in Ysgol Rhyd
Subject to decisions being made at Cabinet
Okay.
over the next 2 sessions.
Right.
Starting next Wednesday.
Okay. Thanks for that. And finally, the educational psychologist has been appointed, which is good news. When does that person start?
They've started.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, our colleague Paul is having some issues. He can hear us in the chamber, but there's some issues there. So what I'll do is just offer Paul the opportunity. Yeah, his thumbs up. Offer him the opportunity that if there is anything that he wanted to ask, just drop me an email, Paul, post this meeting, and I'll then forward that to the appropriate officers and Sue, really, so that we can address perhaps any questions that you may have got as he can't engage. There's a problem with Teams in the chamber, guys. Okay. All right. Okay, colleagues in the chamber, are there any further questions? If not, oh, sorry, Nat. Oh, sorry, Karen and Natalie. Now you're coming up on my screen. Karen first then, and then Nat, I'll come to you then.
Diolch. It's just going back to the point you made about the siting of schools, and the site on the Gurnos at the minute is temporary. So is there any information you can share with scrutiny on a permanent site?
Simple answer is no, because we're waiting for feasibility studies to be undertaken, and that will be going to Cabinet this term.
So in terms of capacity issues for that setting on the Gurneth, are we still okay to,
Yes.
to manage it?
Yes.
Yeah, the feasibility study is ongoing. We've looked at an options appraisal across the 2 sites under consideration. We've also commissioned architects to look at the detail involved in ensuring those sites will be fit for purpose. That will include some costings, because we'll need to go to Welsh Government and ensure we've got all the relevant capital grants in place to deliver that. So as Sue said, the aim is to bring a report in the autumn term for a decision on that. But in terms of the current capacity of Safle Gurness, yes, that's sufficient to manage for the next couple of academic years before we would relocate to the permanent location, which would be around September 26, around that sort of time. But we'll have further details once the feasibility study's been completed.
Because I think it's a very successful setting, isn't it? And it's won the awards. And it'd just be a shame to up sticks and move it somewhere else, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think in terms of the Maestrin, that we would need the Maestrin to be retained in its current location in any case. For us to successfully grow a seedling provision primary, it will take several Maestrin across different locations within the catchment area whenever that's confirmed. So we need the Gurness Maestrin to be successful, but we will need other Maestrin provisions as well to help grow the school in the long term.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. Natalie.
I just want to say thank you for the local authority and everybody involved with the Eisteddfod as well. I wasn't able to make it, but doing dysgu Cymraeg, so I was particularly fascinated about the Eisteddfod. Couldn't make it, but the social media coverage from the local authority and Siamairon was great. So I kept up to date on that. So thank you, diolch yn fawr for that. I just wanted to ask, so new employees come into the local authority have to complete the 10-hour Welsh course. Is there an expectation on existing employees and in particular school staff to do a particular level of Welsh for their roles?
When we brought it in to the council, it was the learning department were expected to do it, and the heads of service were asked to make sure that the learning department has actually done it. School staff, your ITE in initial teacher training, there would be an expectation that they've done some Welsh through initial teacher training. So it's unless they come in from England,
Yeah.
you know, from that, it would have been covered in their initial teacher training aspect. And there is a similar 10-hour to hours that they actually on PGC courses they will actually follow, and they, depending on their proficiency of Welsh, will depend which courses they follow throughout their PGC year.
Perfect. Diolch yn fawr.
No problem. Thank you, Natalie. Okay, colleagues, I can't see that anybody else has indicated to ask any questions. Are there any comments? No, if not, then I think we've met all those recommendations in the report to obviously discuss and ask questions as well. At that point, I will thank Anne Harrod for her participation as well. And Harrod, you're more than welcome to leave the meeting now. And we'll move swiftly on to agenda item number 5, which is school balances and the medium-term financial plans. And obviously, we are receiving a report which reflects the current financial position of Merthyr schools, showing that current financial position in the schools and the longer term position, pupil numbers and the impact efficiencies had on schools last year and will have in the future. And we are to use this information really to inform future priorities. So on that note, a cabinet member, I'll hand back over to you then. And then we also have Anthony with us to ask any questions as well as Sue.
Diolch, Chair. At the end of the 2023-24 financial year, schools balances across Merthyr Tydfil held in reserves were £2.1 million. This represents a 45% reduction in balances year on year, with 4 schools in a deficit budget position, i.e. 17% of all Merthyr Tydfil schools. Across Wales, schools balances school balances fell year on year by 54%, with 20% of all schools being in a deficit, slightly more than Merthyr Tydfil. 12 local authorities have at least 20% of their schools in deficit, and 4 have at least 35% in deficit. There are also 2 local authorities that have an overall negative balance position across the school's budgets. Members should be aware the school balances across Wales are in the most challenging position that they have been since March 2020, just prior to the pandemic, and there are a similar number of schools across the country in deficit at that time. As part of the Council's budget setting process for 2024-25, the school's formula funding was increased in line with the usual practices to include pay awards, energy inflation, general inflation increases, and pupil number changes. However, following the inclusion of all these items, budget had a reduction of 3.9% per school applied. To help balance budgets, schools have reduced a total of 49 posts this financial year. Most of these posts were fixed-term contracts with less than 2 years' service. There were also 9 voluntary redundancies. There have been no compulsory redundancies to date. Schools have also reduced spending on capitalisation, IT, agency cover, and building maintenance to help balance budgets. There are currently 6 schools applying for a planned licence deficit. 4 of these have submitted plans to recover the deficit, and 2 schools are currently unable to balance. Discussions are ongoing with these schools to identify additional savings opportunities to ensure the deficit budget is stabilised during 24 and 25, and recovery plans are addressed to return to a balanced budget. Over the period of the medium-term financial plan, an additional 9 schools are projecting a deficit budget position in years 2 and 3. Further work will be undertaken with these schools to consider plans to address these indicative deficits prior to April 2025. A similar trajectory in school balances is expected across Wales, with an increasing number of schools facing deficit budget positions in the current financial period and beyond. The full impact of the 2023-24 and 2024-25 budget reductions on schools in terms of staffing levels, curriculum delivery, and on standards has not yet been fully realised and will be staggered over several academic years. As well as impacts on reduced staffing levels and being able to set a balanced budget, there are also indications that a significant number of schools have reduced capacity to deliver early interventions, which is impacting on requests for additional funding. Secondary schools have also reduced their alternative curriculum for the academic year for 2024-25 offer for learners who struggle with an academic diet. Class sizes have increased in all key stages, and for key 4 secondary schools have started to adjust their curriculum offer. Further reduction in posts are expected as schools facing a budget deficit implement recovery plans. This reduced capacity within schools will also limit schools' ability to support the effective delivery of the RAS strategy. Officers will continue to work with head teachers and governors of schools who are projecting a deficit over the MTFP. Additional work will be undertaken with head teachers, governors, and local authority officers to identify efficiency opportunities for schools to help reduce costs where possible. Members, over to you for questions.
Okay, colleagues, I'll open it up for questions then. Okay, so we've got Anna first and then Clive.
Thanks. At 6.1, there's reference to an alternative system with 7/12 of the annual savings be found in 1 year. Could you elaborate more on this point? What would the challenges and benefits be of implementing such a system?
Yeah, thanks. It's really challenging for schools because of how the academic year operates as compared to the financial year. So the financial year obviously is April to March, and typically when schools' funding is reduced, it's reduced from the April. But schools have already set their the curriculum, their staffing, their classes for that academic year. So they're having to pick up the costs for the summer term with less funding. The majority of savings that the school are able to find through staffing typically is from September. So with schools facing a full year of financial cuts from April, they typically have to find them more savings from the September in order to be able to balance. So it's a really challenging position. I know it's something which we previously discussed when we've considered how best to apply budget reduction to schools' budgets. But with the schools having faced 2 years of reductions to date, and the significant pressure on the majority of our schools in Merthyr, it seems that this is an area we need to consider again when we're thinking of budget setting for 25-26.
Thanks. And I sit on the Regeneration Committee, and we previously received information from the procurement department, and through that there was significant discussion about potential savings for schools by improved procurement practices. So I wanted to know how alert the Education Department is to this, and whether you feel there's any opportunities currently identified where you could work with schools to specifically regarding procurement.
Take that, Anne. Yeah. I'll take that. Yeah. The procurement team have been to the head teachers meeting. They've also discussed with governors, and in the governors, in the director's report that goes to governors this term, there's a reminder of the procurement framework. I think when we actually look at some of the detail that sits behind the procurement reports, a lot of it is not as accurate because the timings of payments and the timings of invoice and the thing. So some of it needs to be taken with a pinch of salt because of the way that it's been reported. However, we have seen significant savings in schools where they've gone down the procurement framework and actually utilised the supplier from that framework. But so, it's you can look at data, can't you, in different ways. But we have done that significant piece of work with head teachers and with governors to take that forward.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Anna. Clyde next, and then Lawrence.
Well, I was just wondering how you deduce these figures in the medium-term plan. Is it something that the schools supplied you with? What makes me wonder, there's so many sort of inconsistency. For instance, Cyfarthfa High this year, 93,000 in deficit. Penydre's got a healthy budget, but in 3 years' time, Penydre is more than £500,000 in deficit. And Cyfarthfa is doing better than them. I wondered how you got these figures.
Don't look at me for that. That's all figures, Clive. I'm going to ask Anthony to reply to that one.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good spot. I think the MTFPs come from the schools. They provide us with the information. They work as indicative figures and as an early warning tool. So as soon as schools are then facing a financial deficit, then they start to spend more time looking at those figures in years 2 and 3 and considering what plans do they need to put in place in order to ensure that they're addressing the deficit budget position. So with regards to Cyfarthfa High School, they've faced significant fall in roles for a couple of years, more than a couple of years. And as a result, work's been done with the school to identify that they need to be able to reduce their budgetary pressures, and they've identified areas of savings they can make. So Cyfarthfa have done a lot of work to identify where those savings need to be found, and they've managed to level off that deficit. It's not a great position because it's not a recovered deficit, but it's stabilised over that position. Whereas Penydre and Aventaf, really, because they've been in a position of having healthy balances, they haven't really given years 2 and 3 of their MTFP as much time and attention because it hasn't been necessary. So we wouldn't consider those to be at significant risk at the moment because they do have the time to be able to address the plans to prevent that from happening.
Oh, thanks, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Clive. Lawrence.
Right, thank you, Chair. 5.7 of the report highlights the fact that the council's budget set in 24-25, the reduction, if you like, of 3.9% was applied previous year, and this year is 2.98% reduction. That was a cumulative effect. Is it right then to think of 25, 26, that will be a minimum starter going forward for the next financial year, that those reductions will be expected right from the start?
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. So the way that the budget reductions have been applied, they've been applied over the last 2 years as bottom line cuts to the funding. So the formula funding is built up from a zero base. And then once that's been built up, and as Geraint said when he presented the report, all the relevant inflationary factors are built in. At that point, then the budget reduction is applied. So prior to any budget reduction being applied in addition in 25-26 from April, there would need to be a budget reduction applied to account for the 23-24 and 24-25 reduction. So that would happen
Exactly.
before the budgets are given for April 25.
Yeah, so I feel like that's the minimum going forward for 25-26,
Yes.
and depending on obviously financial situation going forward will determine if there's any more. Yeah. Just an aside, if I can put this one in. I believe there's talk of teachers' wages being 5.5%, but possibly. Now I know the schools have had 4% built into the budget. What would happen then if a 5.5% was agreed ultimately, that 1.5 additional cost? Who would cover that?
I think that'd have to be considered at the time. Once we know what the actual outcome is, we need to give consideration then to the in-year impact, as well as the impact then going forwards. If Sue wants to add anything.
I don't think we're in the position. We're expecting an announcement this week, Lawrence. So I wouldn't want to. I don't think we're in a position to comment on that at the moment. Once we know what the offer is and what Welsh Government is saying, we'll be able to reply to you that in more detail.
I just wonder if schools might be a bit concerned at the moment that if schools had to pick up that 1.5%, it's going to be an additional hit, isn't it? That's all. Regarding then moving on to 7.3 and 7.4, you just mentioned about good resource management in schools is the result of effective leadership and governance, as per Estin. And then it goes on to put some points forward about what that means. So is it fair then that those schools who find themselves in deficit, this has been intimated that basically we're saying that those are ineffective leadership and governance is taking place in those schools, bearing in mind all these cuts that we've just been talking about? Is that a fair thing to be put in the report?
I think that's a fair comment you raised, Lawrence, and it was something that we discussed briefly when we were looking at the report, because the way we want to be, it comes from a long-standing position within the authority when the financial circumstances were different, and it reflected where we wanted to be, with schools having, good plans in place if they were facing a deficit budget position. It does need to be updated, I think, given where we are, not just in this council, but across Wales, and the financial pressures that our schools face. I think it is something we need to reconsider in terms of what is a more realistic to be state in the current context. I'm not sure if Sue wants to add anything.
I think if you go on to 7.4 there rather than 7.3, Lawrence, I think you've got what we would want to actually have a look at. And that second point, that all schools with a planned licence deficit, if they find themselves in that position, actually show that they do have a clear recovery plan and can actually work with us to meet that plan, because it will take time. And certainly in secondary schools, when you've got, and I think we mentioned this in last year's scrutiny, when this came to scrutiny, that secondary schools have planned their Key Stage 4 curriculum, so we know that they're not going to be changes, to the staffing levels for a couple of years whilst they deliver that Key Stage 4. So I think what we're looking at is 7.4 is that actually we will actually see schools managing that and working with us to meet the plan, to meet their recovery plan moving forward, if we can.
Yes, I understand that, but as I say, it's intimating that that those schools that are in that situation are ineffective in their leadership and their governance, as what's been said there. And at the same time, then they found themselves having that cut, if you like, put upon them in March before an April the 1st budget setting framework. And I think that's a bit unfair. That's all, because those people who are involved in those decision making would feel very aggrieved at the critique that's been put in here, I think.
I think when you actually look at how we rag our schools as well, rag rate our schools, I think you will find that some of those schools are, you see that in schools budget forum, and you see it in the report that comes to council as well, that there are schools that are ragged red for whatever, for various reasons. And I think we would challenge some of the decisions that are made. It is a governing body decision. It is a head teacher's decision how you manage the budget. It's a difficult situation for a local authority to manage, because actually we don't manage the school's budget. The governors do, and they do make choices.
Yeah, I don't dispute that, but when schools knew their budget in March or end of February, did they not? Because it's only beginning of March, if I remember correctly, or that time, the council had decided what were the various department amounts, or in February, certainly, wasn't it? So you're talking about a month before schools then were having to make the budgets for the year. And that's why, as you intimated, Anthony, about the problem with the 5/12 versus 7/12. So then you're talking about, you've got 5/12 already in our academic, you're committed to whatever you're doing, and the majority of spend is staffing. So you're trying to say then, in order to achieve savings, potentially, you are having to reduce staff by September to get that, and you only get 7/12 of that. And that is now in April. And you know about notification, etc. So I just think, I won't say anymore, but I think it's a bit unfair. Thank you.
I think this is one of the reasons why we do MTFPs with schools, because a number of other local authorities don't, do they, Ant? But actually you can see the if you've got the medium term financial plan, you can actually see where you're going if the budget stays the same. So there are some schools that even when the budget is staying the same, they're not making those necessarily adjustments as they should. So I think
come back to you. I could come back to you, but I won't.
I think, shall I help you on that point? Just to add to that, I think where my colleague is coming from is that sometimes you can't tar everybody with the same brush. So I think sometimes the narrative around that needs to be perhaps reconsidered for future reports, because if those of you who've been with me for a very long time will know that we're a governing body and the leadership is, as Sue's quite rightly said, responsible for that school's budget. We have found one of our schools particularly really in dire straits over the years, and that school was brought to us for scrutinising with the head and the governor for finance as well. So I think that's where that paragraph leads to. But I think where my colleague Lawrence is coming in is where those financial set-in protocols are in place. It isn't necessarily perhaps a leadership in the governing body reason behind some of those management or those failings, etc. So I think we just need to think about the narrative of the report, if perhaps there are other reasons around it. But just to reiterate Sue's point, that the leadership and the governing body are wholly responsible for how they take that forward. But I do take Lawrence's point about tarring everybody with the same brush, if you like, and it may not necessarily be their particular issue or reason.
I think you see certainly give that further thought,
yeah,
Chair, for future reports.
Yeah, okie doke. Okay, we'll move on, and I shall go on to Jacob.
So in 4.4, obviously there's mentions of posts, and obviously there's been mentions again about further reductions in posts for schools, and obviously we've discussed about the reduction of capacities and ending of after school clubs and struggle to support the RAS. So I think my concerns is how is this going to affect the quality of education for those students, especially for those ones who have ALN or struggle academically, but of course as well as how will this affect our strategies and resources in the sense of ensuring that we don't have another increase of those not attending education.
Very good question, Jacob. I think we are working very closely with the schools and with the governors to see how we can actually support the schools and support the governors. But also, I think it is fair to say, and this isn't sort of discharging anything from education, that children and young people are in school for 15 to 20% of their time. The rest of the time is in the community and with their parents. And I think there has to be some work, a lot of work done with community and families to address some of the concerns that have been sort of perhaps laid at the door of schools. Because if parents and the community are not working with schools, with children and young people, and offering those opportunities, schools can't do it all in the 20% that they've got the children and young people. So this is where our community focused schools agenda comes in very strongly, where our work of our youth services, the work of the work of some of our third sector organisations to support our children and young people and their families in education and in lifelong learning.
But in regards then to those who do attend schools, how will this reduction of the posts affect the quality of those children who do attend schools in achieving the qualifications they would need, well, to further on progression of life, I suppose?
The issue that I think one of the issues that, when we've said it in the report, haven't we, the concern that is on our interventions certainly in our primary schools, because that's where the cuts have had to be made in our primary schools. If you're looking at larger class sizes, there is a school of thought that says smaller class sizes have better results. There's also a school of thought and research that proves that it doesn't matter how many children you've got in the class. If you've got good quality teaching and learning in front of the class, the children will actually thrive, as it doesn't matter what size class you've got. It is the concern is our vulnerable learners and how we actually address the ALN, and it is working with staff and giving them the strategies to enable them to do that without putting more pressure on staff, and which are already in a very highly pressurised environment. And I don't think that really answers your question, but I've tried my best, Jacob, and we see where we go.
I appreciate very much. Thank you.
The leader also wants to come in there as well as our cabinet member. So,
Jacob, I thought that was a fantastic question. It was, right? But you need to ask that question to a lot of people in the higher positions than we are, because it goes down to funding. It definitely, everything boils down to funding, from UK government to Welsh government. Then what comes down to us, as you can see from what I said earlier about all the schools in Wales being in, the trouble that they're in with deficits, etc. We go through some challenging times with ALN, the fallout from COVID, the pandemic, and trying to get children back into school with attendance, with a lack of resource. And that's all we can see at the moment, at the coalface, is next year we're gonna have less money again. And it is challenging, and all the time, fair play to the staff in the education services and the teachers in the school. They're doing the best they can with a limited resource. And I think we just have to wait and see. It's a waiting game, but that's all we can say is, please give us more money.
Okay, Jacob, thank you. Colleagues, I'm going to go on to Hannah next, and then I'm going to conclude with Jeff, because I think we've done some really good questioning on this item, if that's okay. So, Hannah.
Thanks, Chair. Sir, you'll be pleased to know you practically answered the question.
Oh, we are lovely, thank you.
And my question was, what is the increase of class sizes? Because I am worried about the impact at standards of teaching and learning, and also the workload of staff, because obviously we're all teachers of ALN. Our workload is going up and up and up and up. So I think there needs to be some sort of sensible thinking as well. If workload is going up because we need to address these things, there isn't enough funding. There needs to be a conversation of what are we going to remove from teachers, so that is actually workload impact assessed, and that actually standards of teaching is still as high as it possibly can be, because there is a worry with curriculum areas. If they are reducing, then children can't opt for certain subjects when they come to GCSE, so we're reducing their career opportunities. Has that been sort of discussed?
It was, we did some work with the college last year. It mentions in the report that that schools are stopping their alternative curriculum delivery.
Yeah.
We've done some work with the college to actually offer some alternative curriculum style activities, and I want to say 3 of the schools have taken up on that offer and have got children actually attending the college now. We're following a model that they've used in Carmarthenshire, where they go in school uniform as opposed to actually, so they're still part of the school and it's part of the school day. So that's one of the options. And Ellis and myself have got a meeting with the secondary head teachers this week to discuss ways forward and how we can support them. And one of the things I think we need to start looking at is that joint delivery of Key Stage 4 options. You know, you keep your academic subjects, with some of the vocational offers can be offered through the college, can be offered in one school with other schools, you know, following the ES school model, or actually we are small enough in Merthyr to actually transport children from school to school, the old 14 to 19 network. Timetabling, logistical nightmare for whoever's doing the timetable. But I think if we start now, we've got that opportunity. So the schools almost become centre of excellence, I suppose, for particular subjects, and the children can actually the children and young people can move around for those subjects. So that's one of the things that we're considering with the head teachers and the deputy head teachers, because they meet separately moving forward.
We've done that in the past, haven't we? And it
Yes.
has worked well with sort
Yeah.
of post-16. So it would build their resilience
Yes.
as well of preparing them for actual college later on down the line.
And I think if you actually look at the WGC vocational GCSEs, the college are probably better placed because of the resources that they've got to deliver some of those, and that their staff are better placed to deliver those. So it's how we can engage with the college and the schools to actually look at that moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay, Hannah. Jeff.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I've just got one question. Jacob really succinctly put my question before me, so that's good. Anthony, this is the piece of paper you gave me. I presume you've got it, and it's helpful, but in order for scrutiny to understand it easier and to give some significance to it, would it be possible to put pupil numbers and the differential that the pupil numbers are on that report? I accept we don't want to see columns and columns and columns. I get that. But what I want to see is pupil numbers and the change in pupil numbers, because that would allow us to more accurately reflect what the school is doing and going through. Obviously, there is a lot of reasoning behind school goes into deficit, not least of which is, as Geraint has said, you know, the information that comes down from the UK into Welsh down to here, the amount of money naturally has to be taken out. But what I would like to see, so that scrutiny can do their job more effectively, is some further information on these MTFPs, perhaps with pupil numbers. Can that be achieved?
Anthony is just considering his Excel competencies, and we'll give you an answer now, Jeff.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can certainly provide that information, Jeff. What the right format would be, we'd have to consider that further, because you say you wouldn't want to overcomplicate necessarily, because there's a lot going on that spreadsheet already, but potentially with a second appendices, so you can see what the pupil number changes are. We can certainly provide you with additional information outside of the meeting.
Yeah, I think there could be an overlay to it then for you, Jeff, you know, just to give that then.
And Chair, might I ask that the response, and I appreciate that Sir and Anthony are really busy, I get that, yeah. Could I ask for a reasonably timely response in that? Would that be possible?
Yes, of course, I'm sure that'll be absolutely fine. I shall look to Anthony. Can we have those pupil numbers, if that's okay, Anthony?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Shall we say, obviously, prior to our next scrutiny,
That
which
would
is
be
the 14th of October? Is that okay,
Yeah,
Jeff?
that's absolutely fine.
Is that all right with you, Anthony? Are you okay with
That's
that?
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, fine. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Now, my vice chair was going to ask a question. He's not. I've noticed this. There's Jeff got in. He's done it. Okay. So, Hannah and Natalie, I'm going to come back to you. Then I am going to conclude this. Okay. So, Hannah first. Then
Just a quick one. It says in 6.2 that there was a delay in staff reductions in 23-24. Do you have a forecast already for the sort of staff reductions that's going to be needed across the school estate this year?
Schools have already made decisions with regards to the current academic year,
Yeah.
but we'd still expect there to be some delay in those staffing reductions, simply because some schools are able to balance in the current year, and they may not need to make those reductions until the next financial period. So the full impact takes a couple of academic years to work its way through the system.
Okay.
It's 94 posts have been lost over 2 financial years
No, I know.
to date.
Okay, Han? Yeah. Okay, Natalie.
Thank you. So there's a substantial percentage of children in the system that are not diagnosed as ALN. We know there's a number of children that mask, so they won't have been considered in budgets with regards to what we're putting towards ALN. Those children, a lot of them will have interest-based nervous systems, so that the core subjects may not particularly interest them. My concern is that the additional subjects, the ones that are being cut, with a lot of those, you can actually get a lot of children will disengage from school before they get to the chance to study in the college. Has that been considered in anything? It's an awkward one because obviously it's to do with the budget, but it's not included in the budget because they're like a missing section, if you like, of children.
Yeah, we're looking to engage with the college at pre-16 though.
Okay.
So it's not, you're not waiting for them to do their GCSEs and go. We're looking to engage with the college at 14. You know, Hannah mentioned what we've done previously, the 14 to 19
Yeah.
framework. So it's looking how we can offer that vocational offer. And each school has got a vocational offer. But as the numbers opt for them, because not so many children opt for those subjects, if they're not enough and they say, well, actually, we can't deliver that because we haven't got enough staff and it's not going to be cost effective, we need to be looking at the college to see how they can support us. Or, as I said to Hannah, how we can join the schools together to offer those non-academic subjects, as it were, as a collective. So it's
Okay.
certainly something we're very much aware of. And how working with schools to see how we can address the
Yeah.
needs of the
I
children.
think that's great. Thank you. My concern is that the children are a bit younger again that maybe can't get into neurodevelopmental services because maybe they're conforming in school, they're not getting picked up, and they could be lost at an earlier age. It'll show in attendance and other things as well. But okay, thank you.
And I think just to add to that as well, I'm sure that you'll know that there is has been a consultation with Qualifications Wales around VCSEs to offer those additional qualifications around the 14 to 16, 17 as well, you know, for 2027, so we're a while off yet. But I think they're always under consideration as well to make sure, as Sue has said, there's that offer to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to be engaged as well, you know, for whatever really grasps their attention and does what they really need as well, you know, because sometimes the academic offers aren't for everybody and the vocational routes are, so it's really important to capture that as well. Thank you, Sue. Okay, colleagues, no further questions. Any comments on the item? No? And again, just offering that to Paul, our colleague online. If he did have any, please send them through to us, Paul, and we'll get those answered, okay? Okay, Anthony, you again are more than welcome to stay. It goes flashes on, then flashes off. You're more than welcome to stay, but you're more than welcome to leave as well. Thank you so much for that. And remember that deadline now for my colleague Jeff, 14th of October now for that overlay, isn't it, Jeff, for that date? You've got his number. Great. Okay, no problem.
Mark.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, agenda item 6, guys, is the self-evaluation report. Again, if you remember, I talked about us being that critical friend to challenge really and reflect back on the self-evaluation report so that we can make sure that we have and bring about with our colleagues in education that continuous improvement as well. We did, as a reminder, attend a workshop on the 14th of May, which did help us sort of go through some of this lingo that we have, you know, within some of these reports as well. But today, you know, we are going to move on and just look at the self-evaluation report and where we're at. So again, Geraint, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this self-evaluation report considers the activities of the Learning Department during the financial year of 2023-24. This was due to be considered at the committee before the summer recess, but due to the general election, was put back this evening, and we've also had another election in between as well. Please note, therefore, that a significant number of the areas for development were already being worked upon, and the priorities for development will be in departmental business plans for this academic year. The outcome from summer 2024 examinations are not considered as part of this evaluation, but will form part of the key question 1 summary, which will be presented to Cabinet in the spring term, and verified data is not received until the end of the autumn term. Members were invited to attend a workshop to discuss the report during the summer term, and the slides from the session have previously been shared with the members. I would like to focus on some of the areas of improving practice outlined in the report. Firstly, the Business and Education Together Partnership, or the BETP for short. This was established in 2020, but has grown in reach and impact throughout the academic year. 16 businesses and organisations have now pledged their support to the partnership, up from 2 at the start of the year. The BETP launch event took place on the 31st of January, and was attended by over 100 individuals from schools, businesses and third-party organisations. This event aimed to officially launch the partnership and to raise awareness of the work that had already been undertaken, as well as the developing further links and connections between schools and businesses. I have been fortunate enough to have attended some of the events which have been put on in relation to BETP, and the work the children and young people have achieved together with businesses has been inspirational. And secondly, the development of team leader sessions. The department effectively uses learning away day sessions to focus on key areas for development. These sessions ensure team leaders from learning are held half-termly. One is a half day with a specific focus, the other a whole day linking into self-evaluation processes and whole department priorities. These sessions give team leaders the opportunity to work with each other to discuss key issues that affect their work and the work of the department and to feed into future plans. The topics for 2023-24 have included Welsh language, Capital 1, which came about following the inspection activity in January of the year, and cyber security. Following the self-evaluation outcomes in 2023-24, the department has identified the following priorities for this academic year. Develop processes to meet the implications of the middle tier review. Members have received some information on this, but will receive further information over the course of the term and beyond. Work with schools to develop robust processes to manage behaviour. Work with schools to ensure financial stability. Develop sustainable approaches to community schools. Consider how to embed museum services, library services into the work of the department and wider. The work of the department is also key to delivering the first priority in the corporate plan, an aspirational Merthyr Tydfil focused on learning. Members, over to you for questions.
Thank you, Geraint. Colleagues, any questions? Jeff? Oh, apologies, Jeff. Anna was first in.
No, that's fine.
Anna and then Jeff.
Thank you. Throughout this report, there's references to community-focused schools. I know this is going to be looked at late in the cycle, but can I have initial thoughts on the role of community-focused schools? How is this adding value to schools and education? And also a factual question of when does that grant funding end?
I'll take the last one as your last part of the question, Councillor. The grant funding, as you know, will finish in March because it's SPF funding. So it's how that moves forward. We are hoping that we will secure the funding to at least go until the end of the academic year, because obviously it's looking at how we work in academic years. I still think in terms. I've been out of school so many years, but I still think in terms. But we will be looking at keeping it until at least the end of the summer term. The impact is variable depending on which cluster area you're actually in. I think it is fair to say that in the north of the cluster, in the north of the county, where they've been doing it for an extra year, there is more work together, more working together. And I think as we look at budgets, we need to look at how those can be better managed, perhaps as as schools working together. Which we've got a lot of work engaging with health in clusters. But again, that's project based. So the funding for like Pippin is not long term, and that's done a lot of work with the community focused schools. So they've done a lot of work with it around attendance, and we have seen some impact on that, particularly at transition levels. And we've done a lot of work with those children who were not attending at primary, and we were concerned about how they were going to make the transition into secondary. That has been positive. It didn't, typical thing, it went well, but it's dropped off again. So we've had to go back in with those families. So there are some positives around it. We've linked it in with the Welsh, as you heard from Angharad earlier. We've linked it in with Business and Together, the Business and Together partnership. So it's trying to ensure that it's not duplicating work, but it's actually sustaining the work that's going on and empowering schools to take on some of the activities. We've done a lot of work. They've secured a lot of funding from Keep Wales Tidy, which looks at how volunteers as well can work in the schools and actually utilise the grounds better in schools. And that's been one of the major successes of it. But there are a number of successes that I wouldn't want to go into because obviously we pick it up when they come to scrutiny.
Thanks. And my second question is a very blunt way of connecting the previous report and this report. Looking at the outcomes here and the picture we've seen in the last report, do you feel that more money is the only way we're seeing improvements in performance in this department?
Yes.
Question? That's the answer?
Cool. Thanks, Anna. Okay, now, Jeff, I am going to come to you.
Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And further to what Anna's just said, it was going to be one of my questions, exactly that, and you've elucidated the report, so that's fine. Can I turn to page 19 of the 69-page report about CSC? You don't really need to see it. I'm really asking, what does the CSC do exactly to contribute to the improvement of schools across the LA? Where is the evidence support the need to continually utilise them, especially when the education leadership team are critical of key aspects of their work?
Sue, just as a reminder, before you jump in, obviously we have got CSC coming to scrutiny in the annual report as well, but yeah, just jump in.
And I think you bear in mind that there is the opportunity to scrutinise that. One of the things that we have been open with our scrutiny, with our concerns, is that we don't get the information. And we don't get ready information from CSC, and it's something that we've brought up to them. There's a lot of they hold a lot of information about our schools, but we don't necessarily get that information, so it doesn't allow us to move forward as quickly as we would want to move forward. You asked about utilising CSC. I think the middle tier review will bring some significant changes to the school improvement agenda moving forward. So I'm not going to go into that at this meeting because obviously there are lots of discussions going on at national level as well as at regional levels for how we look at that. We have to bring the school improvement service has to come closer to the local authority. If we're looking at shrinking budgets, we've got to look at how how the school improvement arm works closer with us to allow us to address our priorities and actually work with, we've mentioned in this scrutiny meeting a number of times about additional learning needs. Additional learning needs sits with the local authority. It doesn't sit with a regional consortia. And yet school improvement for me includes the learning outcomes for children, children with additional learning needs. So we have to work closer together. Attendance impact sits with the local authority, doesn't sit with the officers in the regional consortium, and yet they're the ones that are in schools, so they can be asking the questions for us around that. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be teased out as to how we move forward on that agenda. And it'd be unfair for me to say any more at that, but it'll certainly come out over the next couple of terms.
Thank you for that. And I can see exactly where you're coming from. So, yeah, thank you for that. Now, my second question, Chair, I'm going to be really critical and perhaps blunt, and please forgive me about this, but if we turn to page 35 of the 69-page report, it asks a question. How well does the service engage with corporate support services to help improve service provision and delivery? And at the beginning, you ask us to agree the judgment, and the judgment given is adequate. Within this section, the report states that scrutiny members often ask challenging questions. This I would hope to be true, but despite asking those challenging questions, especially when answers are not immediately available, this LA seems to place no precedence in gaining those answers quickly and on passing to scrutiny members. Recently, as the Chair knows, I'd need to ask a number of these questions, but after many attempts to have the answers given, I had to resort to ringing the director directly to ask for these answers. Once I did this, the answers were rapid in response. So it would seem that the LA does not hold scrutiny in high regard, and this seems to be borne out in the evidence I've just given. To add insult to injury, it would seem the senior leadership team for education place a judgment of only adequate in all that we do and all that our support officer does. Now, I object in the strongest of terms to this judgment of myself and my colleagues and our efforts and achievements. Personally, and as an owner of a company in a professional services environment, I am never classed as adequate. Usually classed as good and occasionally outstanding and excellent, but I'm not used to the adequate classification and do not accept this as a description of this performance of this scrutiny team. Secondly, and in defence of our scrutiny officer, I do not understand the statement on page 35. It says, beneficial to have clear understanding of the role of scrutiny officers. Under my understanding, the LA designed this post and it surely had an ideal person specification and a job description. However, apart from this, I have to say on a personal level, I've had the need to call Jane, and it is Jane we're talking about, Chair, yeah, on any number of occasions. She's also always cheerful and happy to help. She often finds out the required information, usually immediately, although sometimes even she is kept waiting for the responses. I've never found her to be only adequate. Indeed, I would say if you told Jane she was adequate, you might need to duck, Chair. Yeah. I would rate her as good and usually excellent in all that she does and she achieves for me as a scrutiny member. And if she does the same amount of work for me as she does for other scrutiny members as she does for me, then she is truly outstanding. Am I a member of the Jane fan club? You might say that, but I only state what is known by everyone on this scrutiny committee, but is obviously not known by the senior management team on the education department. I come out to bat for my clients when they're under pressure. I do so now for the client, my client who is not my client, but the clerk. I rarely lose. So can I have an answer to that, please? And I'm sorry to put you in a position, Sue.
I'm not.
I think I need to.
Yeah, I'm not prepared to answer that in scrutiny. I will answer it to, because I don't think it would be fair on Jane to answer that question in scrutiny. But I am prepared to meet you afterwards, and I will actually go through it I will actually go through it with you, and I'll share with Jane, but I don't want to do it in a
No,
I don't
no,
want
no,
to do it in a public meeting, if that's all right.
And I accept that, Chair. I wouldn't expect you to go through the Jane part of it at all. But what I would say is, could you answer the first part of about this scrutiny committee?
Sorry, if you actually look at the, I'm taking you back to the descriptor, and I think this is where schools used to get not concerned, used to get upset when they actually looked at the descriptors, because adequate is a horrible word.
It is.
But its strengths outweigh weaknesses, but important areas require improvement. Now, this scrutiny, bearing in mind this was last year, right, to May, to the end of March, so it's the financial year. This scrutiny, and I think it's fair to say, and I'm hoping Jane will agree, has improved quite substantially in the way that it asks questions, in the way that it responds to officers. I'm not saying that my officers necessarily respond to scrutiny in the way that scrutiny members are asking. That wasn't the case throughout the year. And there have been times when we've brought reports that we haven't necessarily been questioned, that scrutiny members hadn't read the reports, and we were having questions that perhaps didn't relate to the reports. This is an annual report, and it shows what the year's expectation, the year's evaluation of the committee is. And I would still say that the last year, that was adequate. We're moving into good, Jeff, but for last year, I would say that officers certainly came and felt that, I'm going to really regret what I'm going to say next, that they weren't scrutinised. Yeah, I know I'm going to regret that. Definitely regret it as I'm saying it. But, if we look at the questions that have been asked today, you wouldn't have had that.
No.
You wouldn't get that. But there's been a change in the way. And I do think we're in person and it's different when we're in person. When it's in hybrid, it feels different. The feel of the room feels different. We certainly go out of here feeling scrutinised, but we weren't feeling scrutinised. And I wish I hadn't. Yeah, I'm not looking forward to the next one now. But if you can accept that, Jeff, that's where it's come from. And we had long discussions about it as a senior leadership team. And I, take on board what you've said about, that you're not getting the responses from my officers. That's something that I've got to take on board and take back to them and feed that back.
Thank you, Chair.
Can I just add that,
Yeah.
Jeff? Because obviously I wasn't here last year, so I wasn't part of that. But for the meetings I've attended, I thought they'd been fantastic. It's well attended. Questions are fantastic. Brilliant, and it's much better than what I was used to for regeneration in the past. I know Gareth, you would maybe second me on that one. And 5 years ago, more, but this is really good. It is really good. The reports are good. And I think the questions are really to the point.
So can I just clarify with you? And I thank you for what you said. Yeah, but I need just to clarify. What you're actually saying is this report here, in this particular terms, goes back a year. Yeah. But Lisa was still chair a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is that correct? Is that the year you're referring to? You're not referring to the year before, because I've been on scrutiny all that time.
23,
when there was another lady, Tanya.
No, it was Harvey prior to scrutiny.
Sorry?
Lisa.
Harvey.
No.
Came in June 2020.
Sorry.
I came in as chair in June 2022.
Okay. All right. So I'm perhaps I'm wrong there. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I want to make a response, but I can see my colleagues intimating my vice chair wants to come in a second, so I'll just leave my vice chair come in and then I'll go back to the order there then. Was it a point you wanted to make, not a question, Anna?
Just some clarification on this topic.
Okay, bear with me a second then. Gareth?
Yeah, I just want to highlight as well, it wasn't so long ago that Eston inspected the local authority and the scrutiny committee was highlighted. Wasn't it? I'm right in saying?
That was in this year. So
It was. I was trying to think when it was. Okay.
January. Sorry, my mic on. It was in January. There was an activity.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just come back and reflect because I can feel the passion coming through your question, Jeff, and quite rightly so, I have to say. So without actually naming officers, you stole a bit of my thunder with regards to some of the narrative that was in it, and that is absolutely fine because I do echo your sentiments around that. And then on reflection, it does go back, and we have said to Estin nationally about the way that they use the wording. It comes across as a bit of a, negative word. It does, adequate really does, until you actually read then what goes alongside it. But I think you're spot on because what we are is that critical friend to challenge. And I think that we do that quite effectively. And certainly, moving on and being positive, when we come to the next SER and our workshops in the beginning of next year, I'm sure that we will be challenging for that to be moved to a good. Definitely within the evidence that's behind that as well, as far as the Estin feedback, the officer feedback and the director feedback Sue has given us as well. And of course, the support, the corporate support that we receive, and certainly I and my vice chair, speaking on behalf of you guys, receive from our officer. Absolutely no issues with that. So just to give you that reassurance, Jeff, on board with you and what you said, felt that passion coming through, and we shall definitely keep an eye on that moving forward. Okay. Anna, I'm going to come to you because you want to seek some clarification, and then I'll move to Jacob. Oh, Gareth, you've got your...
Oh,
that's all right. And then Jacob, I'll come to you. Okay. Anna, did you want some clarification?
Thank you. Only because of where the conversation's gone, and my reading of question 2.1 is perhaps quite different to others, because the question is how well does the service engage with other departments, and obviously this is a self-evaluation for education. So in these ratings, I'm not taking those as a rating of the other departments, but as a rating of the relationship between the two. So I just wanted clarity on that, because if we're looking at the relationship, that adequate rating does seem more fair. So just looking for that clarity, really.
Yeah, I think within the self-evaluation report, and if you remember that from the workshop as well, yeah, it is about reflection. I think you make a very valid point about the relationships. I think it's sometimes when it comes down to those paragraphs where it's a little bit more specific, coming back to Jeff's point, it's just, as we do, questioning that and challenging that really, because that all builds a picture of why then we determine and come to that decision. And I think that's the point I was making then about us moving forward, understanding what adequate means from an Estin perspective, not beating ourselves up too much about it, because it does say that strengths outweigh those weaknesses, but certainly moving on, that we will be challenging and looking then, as long as those partnerships are there as well, Anna, for that to be perhaps improving to a good. But yeah.
Can I come in,
Yeah,
Chair,
please
that
do.
actually Eston don't use judgments anymore, which
No,
I think is what we've also found quite challenging for ourselves moving forward. And Eston use a narrative form of words, but I think you've hit the nail on the head there, and it's relational, which I think which is why we need to take it perhaps outside here to have that discussion. But Eston don't. And when I sent this report to Jane, she came back to me and she said, Sue, you didn't put any judgments in it, because we use the narrative as opposed to the judgments now moving forward. So that's it's a corporate judgment, not an inspectorial judgment, although the descriptors are based on the old Eston judgments.
And so moving forward for 23-24, will we be moving away from the old descriptors?
No, because this is not an Eston this is not an Eston self-evaluation.
Yeah.
This is a corporate self-evaluation. So as members will be aware, we have a new director of governance that's starting in October. So we may very well see changes to this format moving forward and how it's actually presented. I wouldn't want to guess on what happens to that.
Okay, so what we may do, guys, when we look at the actions and impact, when we reflect, is just consider that perhaps our question then to corporate, so maybe that person that's asked scrutiny, would be that we are asking perhaps these need changing, they need changing, because I think it is based on old narrative from Eston, and they use that, and I think it's time for change maybe then, that we use different descriptors and narrative. Okay, I'm going to go to Jacob next.
So if you look at the full report at page 26 or 106, if you're using the gov. Obviously there's a mention about eligible for free school meals. And when reading it, I wanted to know if you could give a bit more description in the sense of what does entitled mean, because I've assumed, especially in primary schools, that they had a free school meals. So I was just quite surprised to see, for example, for primary school that only 8.96% were eligible, but it was also that there was quite a gap as well between primary and secondary schools as well.
We still use right. So whilst all primary schools have free school meals now, that was one of the Welsh Government's priorities, and so they've all had free school meals. All primary schools have free school meals. That was last February in Merthyr. Not all children in primary schools are eligible for the uniform grants and things like that. So there's still an eligibility through what benefits the families are on. So we can still have that eligibility. So they still class as eligible. We still use free school meals. So you've got all the free, but you've still got. I'm not explaining this very well, am I?
It's a bit confusing.
Eligible for benefits, I suppose, rather than eligible for free school meals. So in secondary school, you've still got the free school meals, but in primary schools, it's those families that have certain benefits that we would class as still eligible for free school meals, so they can apply for those benefits, and we use those to look at attendance figures and things like that.
Affects funding as well.
Yes, it affects. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And just another question, if that's okay. If you scroll down to the next page, it's specifically about bully incidents.
Yes.
Obviously, there's a mention that there's been an increased reports of bullying incidents, and obviously in relation to racist incidents as well. But I was quite curious in regards to what other other areas of bullying there are, because obviously there's only mention of racism. There's nothing about sexism, ageism, ableism, and I think for a young person it's quite it's great that there's quite a low number of racist reports, but it's quite concerning that there still is an increase, but also just sort of quite a brief overview regarding bullying, because it affects a lot of young people quite heavily, doesn't it?
The issue, the way we can report this is that actually schools have to report. It's a statutory duty to report incidents of racism. That has to be reported. Other incidents of bullying don't necessarily have to be reported to the local authority, but the racism one does. So that's why the figures look low. Oh, the other incidents, we don't report on those. There's a lot of cyberbullying, I would suspect, that we are seeing. We've got the incidents, there's a report on peer, so children on, young people to young people themselves, but they don't have to be reported to the local authority. So I think that's where we find this quite difficult to report on. I'm sure Gavin would be able to give you more information if you were interested in that, but we have brought information previously, but they don't have to be reported, and that's basically why we struggle with this bit.
Right. Okay.
Natalie.
Thank you. My question is also on the bullying part, with the racism. It's good to see the figures are reporting. If there was a 0 on there, I'd be I'd be shocked. I'd think there's something wrong. But we know they're going to happen. But obviously there's the Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan. Now it says on here that about diversity is celebrated and healthy debate is encouraged. I went on the DARPL training last year. It's absolutely amazing. Brought me to tears. It was so emotive. It was fantastic. How, as a local authority, and I suppose how are you sort of working on the anti-racist thing, and how are you supporting schools? Is there anything particular to make sure we're anti-racist rather than I don't want to insult you here, but what they say in DARPL is that celebrating diversity would be more kind of passive. Is there anything more sort of we're anti-racist, more active
It would be,
against
as a
racism.
local authority, we don't necessarily, it's the capacity issue, isn't it? As
Yeah.
your office, there isn't a particular, it's added to Andrea's title, that would actually sit under there because she's got the whole school approach aspect, because that's where it fits in. Our schools have attended the DARPL training and would actually, look at that.
Yeah.
We've engaged with the museum service because they've done a lot of work on anti-racism. They're actually presenting some of the work that they've done in a national conference in a couple of weeks. So it is more signposting to schools what is available for them to actually, rather than us doing any specific work around it, we
Okay.
would actually signpost schools to take up the opportunities.
So
for
it's more for us
themselves.
as governing bodies and for school leadership teams to sort of look at
Yes.
what we do and then look to see what else we can do.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So you mentioned Andrea there. I want to say thank you for the wellbeing network that is on Hub. There's some fantastic things on there. In particular as well was the structure in relation to HR and support with occupational health and all that's wonderful. I've never seen anything like that about governor support and the structure as in sort of how the governing bodies and governor support fits in the local authority. I mean, am I right in assuming, I think I am, that governor support and governing sits with Andrea?
Sits in the local,
It
in
is.
the learning department.
Yeah, so Andrea is the lead for that, and then it would then be governor support and then governing bodies. Is that right?
Governing
I've got
bodies
other
almost sit
sides.
sit with
Yeah,
schools.
I just
You've got-
never
you've
see
got the
anything.
learning department, you've got schools. I'm
Yeah.
sure, those of you governors wouldn't want to sit,
No,
close
no,
to
no,
anybody,
yeah.
would you? But
You are, but yeah.
you are support, there's a list, and I'm not sure what list you've actually seen from HR, because I know they're just about to send, which I must remember I've got to send it out. The schools they were sending out to schools who the HR officers are in relation to schools.
Yeah.
I've only got 3 governor support officers. Emma France has just taken on the lead role, the
Yeah,
lead governor
team
role, and then
leader.
you've got Laura and you've got Siobhan. So we won't talk about BTP because Siobhan has left BTP now. She's gone to governor support. So we're not really, we won't go along that. So there are only 3 split across all the schools. So they support our schools.
Yeah.
It's worded, it's support officer.
Yeah.
So
I
you
think
see that.
Andrew's always welcoming her feedback. So I think what I'll probably do is maybe drop her an email just to sort of, because obviously the well-being is her side of it as well. So just what I see with the well-being and the structures, HR things that maybe I'll sort of say, can we have some similar thing for governors? Thank you. And then one quick question. 3.4, leadership and management. Does the service set the right priorities, engaging with feedback? The last point, priority for improvement, consider how to improve how to involve more stakeholders within the self-evaluation process. What stakeholders do you think are missing?
Pupils, although we do go to Empty Boy, but we're actually missing stakeholder, the pupil voice in that. We get quite honest feedback from schools.
Yeah.
We get it from you as well. I'm not looking at anybody in particular, but yes, it's the pupils and possibly parents as well, because we don't necessarily tend to get that from parents.
Okay. Yeah.
Jeff, over to you. Last question then. Thank you.
Key stage 4, page 14. This says some problem areas about staff absenteeism. And it doesn't go much into it. And I appreciate the report goes back a little bit. But I think the same sort of thing still applies now. So could we possibly ask for a report on school staff absenteeism, given the number of absentees over what sort of period, the period between occurrences of same or repeated staff members, functions across the borough for absenteeism. The reason why I'm asking is because obviously Sue's coming across the problem where she said, obviously more money would help to raise standards, but more teachers would help to raise standards. Yeah. And the teachers you have currently, if they're not at work, places extra stress and strain on other teachers. It's Hannah's area, not my area. But, the truth of the matter is that for scrutiny to have some kind of meaning over this, could we have a report on it to see where we are and how we might support you in that?
That's going to be extremely difficult because that is something that I am asking for HR on a regular basis. We have not got a system that allows me to press a button and actually get the school absenteeism. It has to be done through Excel. It takes quite a while, and I get a couple of months of backward looking report. I don't get. I've been asking for a fair time actually for a report that I can actually, so then I can work with schools, because picking up on what Lauren said earlier about leadership, if there is a school with a high number of absentees, you've got to question whether they've been supported, what's the well-being support there. I would struggle to get that report for you, Jeff.
And I'm grateful for the honesty, but perhaps, Chair, we can put some pressure to bear on HR or whoever, or Geraint's listening as well, whoever. But Sue must have. I don't know how you can work without that. I mean, it's fairly obvious to me, and Sue's made the point herself, that she needs access to that information, because if she doesn't have access to it, she can't respond in a way that we would expect her to respond. So I don't know where we go with that, but perhaps you can guide us and make some suggestions. But we certainly need to put pressure on somebody, perhaps, to support Sue in this particular response.
I think we can, again, poor director hasn't started yet, and there's another one that we put in. The new director for governance, we will, one of the things we'll ask. Perhaps we can put that as a query.
And that again comes up perhaps with, a discussion with another scrutiny as well, where we sit on sort of corporate services and resources, where we could give those two questions from myself as the chair over to that. Sadly, because of the by-election and the way that the calendar's changed, I cannot make the meeting again on Thursday because my calendar doesn't allow. I'd set everything, but I'll put them through anyway, that we can perhaps ask, or perhaps I can ask a colleague to ask on our behalf. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, colleagues, we're going to conclude that particular item then. Thank you to Sue and Geraint for, answering all of those questions. And you're now feel free to leave the meeting. Thank you for your attendance. I think we've really met the recommendations within that report, and we'll make some reflections in just a second as well. But thank you guys ever so much appreciated.
Listen, Chair.
Oops.
This must probably be my last meeting for the foreseeable future as the cabinet member for education. But just, thank you for the short time I've spent with you. Like I said, I think you do a great job. Thank you all.
Much appreciated.
Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch. Thank you, Geraint, and thank you for those kind words. Okay, agenda item number 7 is scrutiny referrals. At this point in time, we haven't got any. And then agenda item number 8 is report recommendations. So in the new forward work plan, if you remember, we started doing this, just as I move my papers around, apologies. We started doing this in the last meeting. Where's my little piece of paper? There it is, got it. So when we talk about impact, outcomes, actions, etc. It's just reflection on the meeting. If we go back, first of all, to WESP, I think, that questioning around secondary, etc., around teaching workforce, and Karen's question then around suitability of current sites and maintaining that, I think they were really good. I think we need to just make a note of those as far as the impact of our challenging questions today, so that we can bring those up then when that comes back to scrutiny for us. Similarly then, with school budgets, some of the notes I made, particularly Lawrence's point around that narrative there, I think that it does sort of tar everybody with the same brush, and whilst let's call them cuts, efficiency savings, etc., are caused sometimes because of that line of funding, if you like, and that line of financial decisions, then yes, it does lie on the responsibility of the school, but sometimes they find themselves in that predicament not through ineffective leadership and governance, is what I'm trying to say. Whereas we have to find that balance, because we have dealt with 1 or 2 schools before where it was ineffective. So it's just finding that, because otherwise Lawrence made a valid point that it doesn't sit well otherwise, does it? If you're really trying hard in that school and you've got a good leader and good governance. And the other impact then, I think all of you made it actually, was around teaching standards, the impact on teaching standards, ALN, Nat as well, we brought that up. I think we need to be mindful of that when we come back to look in school budgets and MTFPs, again, what is the actual impact now, where I want to say 6-7 months down the line now, but I think we need to reflect on that again then at an appropriate juncture really to see what is the impact as well. And then with regards to self-evaluation, there was a lot there. There's two things for me to take to corporate. The one is the HR around teacher absenteeism. I was looking to you then, Jeff, because my mind started going blank, but I did write it down. And those descriptors in the SER as well at a corporate level, time for change, I think. And I think we'll make that suggestion, guys. CSC, we'll certainly bring that up in the annual review as well. And the other thing is, again, Anna's point about if we had more funding, would that help us? Well, inevitably, we're going through a lot of change with regards to budgets, SPF, at the future, etc. So just be mindful of that, and we can keep an eye on that then as well. Colleagues, do you have any comments in relation to the report recommendations today? Anna.
Absenteeism. Now, as you know, I work in Blaenau Gwent. We do look at the data through JCC with trade unions, but I'm very mindful of the type of data that may want to come to scrutiny, and we need to be very, very careful that our colleagues in our schools are not accidentally highlighted, because there would be a massive complaint made against this scrutiny committee if they thought that they were actually discussed as an individual
No,
at the meeting.
in no uncertain terms.
Very carefully managed how that information is brought here.
In no uncertain terms is any school discussed individually or any staff member discussed individually. Where my colleague was coming from was just having a ballpark figure. Jeff, and would I be right?
No.
Would I be right in saying that, Jeff? I think where Jeff was coming from is just having that ballpark figure of what we're looking at, because we don't have that ballpark figure, if you know what I mean. And I think then we could then say, well, that's quite high, even over the 20 odd schools. Do you know what I mean? And then that's up to the department to scrutinise that down to the schools to have those conversations. And of course, there's a number of different reasons why perhaps a member of staff is off sick. We would not go anywhere near that. But I think it's important to have that, as we do with council staff, have that overall number.
Could we also ask then if the schools actually have insurance to cover, because obviously there's a funding issue as well with supply costs coming in, and actually our schools having supply teachers in to cover, or they're having cover supervisors, which means then we have a problem of non-qualified teachers in our classrooms teaching children. So it opens up a massive can of worms, really.
It does. And I think for those of us who are governors as well and working in schools, you'll know that when we have those discussions about staff resources and supply cover, that does come up. I think inevitably that's determined then by the head and the governor responsible for teaching provision. So I think there's a dotted line there where we need to ask that from governing support as well. But yeah, very, very valid. Yeah, thank you. Lawrence.
Oh, right. Hi, thanks, Jeff.
Do I press anything?
Thank you. Yes, just following on from the exchange with Sue regarding the finance, it became evident to me that a little bit of a work stream, or whatever you want to call it, I think we need to consider is look at the financial procedures in place to properly support governing bodies to manage their budgets effectively. Because going back to what was discussed there, which is fair enough, but there is, as you rightly say, the governing bodies are responsible for the financial situation of the school. But, and this is something I've had for many years, the financial procedures and systems that are in place are totally inadequate in order for governing bodies to do that effectively, for the reasons I sort of tried to put over there. Because if you're having your budget stated in March, and I know the reasons why, because I've had this discussion with Anthony and so on, but at the end of the day, perhaps it's worth looking into it formally to understand why it is then that in February, that is when you know how much money you've got. you know, as councillors better than me, but
yeah.
having said that, how can you then turn around to governing bodies and criticise them for when I not criticise them for not being able to manage the budgets properly?
Yeah, I think there's a number of different aspects there, because some of the financials go into different academic years as well. But what happens with the budget setting is inevitably the timelines we as council can't change, unfortunately, because that comes from government when they set the settlements. And then after settlements, then, you know, we have draft budget discussions and then formal budget discussions. In statutory and legislation, it has to be set by something like the 6th of March. I'm just giving you an idea. Because legally we also have to set council tax, so that happens within that body. So I completely agree with you. It's so tight, and then it's literally that window. It is similarly, and you remember this when we used to have budget, when I used to come to budget forum, you'll remember that sometimes the cabinet member from education from Cardiff will then all of a sudden give our schools all this additional cash that we have to spend by the end of March. You know, it was crazy, wasn't it? Because the way that it's done. I think that is a wider conversation, Lawrence, as well, that we may need to take, perhaps WLGA, you know, and people like that, rather than just Merthyr Tydfil, because it impacts all 22 authorities.
Yeah, but
the timings of the setting.
Yeah, the timings. But having said that, about how are we in Merthyr then going to deal with that? I know, as you said that, but there are ways. Well, no ways where we can mitigate it, or whatever. I don't know. I'm not saying the answer.
Yeah.
But having said that,
typically, Lawrence, the revenue settlement for all local authorities is known at the end of, I think, the 3rd week of December.
It is, yeah, that's right.
Just before Christmas.
It is, yeah, I know.
So there's a very tight timeline between that. You know, I totally agree with you. But there's a tight timeline between December and March.
No, I agree with it. So how can you then make comment to a governing body who's managing a budget?
Absolutely.
You tell me.
Yeah.
We are. This report is. We are here.
Yeah.
How come?
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to say about that narrative needs to be broken into two. One where they are describing an effective leader and governing body, no matter what funding they've got, they're still being effective in that. But I think where those narrative needs to change is if historically they have got a school that really isn't managing their financials well, aside from what they're given.
Okay. That's why I want to have I don't want to prolong it here because I'll be tired. That's why I want to have a separate debate on that, because there's more to talk about this, to be honest. There's more to talk about this.
Lawrence, I don't know that we have the what's the word I'm looking for? You're right, we are tired now, but I don't know that we have the ability to change any of that. Unfortunately, the only thing that the ability this scrutiny would have to change the narrative around how that's reported. We wouldn't have the ability to change the way the budget is set or the timelines. Do you know what I mean?
No, I know I'm got that, but it's to understand then. Everybody needs to understand the mechanics of it all, because like I said in the budget forum, so I'm fully aware of how it works, or it doesn't work, put it that way. And the point is, though, nobody else does in schools. And what I'm trying to get at is that if you understand the mechanics of it, then people are hiding, as you say, there are ineffective governing bodies, I don't dispute that, but they're hiding behind the facts then. You can't see the wood for the trees then, because this is happening, so therefore, but potentially you can't see it. You should be able to see it, because it's being done properly and it's being supervised properly, you should be able to see it. But it gets middled up, doesn't it? It's an excuse. I'm sorry, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. Jeff, finally then.
Yeah.
Lawrence, you're on. You're all right. You're on.
So it might be a suggestion that helps. I hope it does. Is maybe there could be to give more certainty to this financial settlement. That the schools have a budget that's ring fenced, because that would at least give you some basis of understanding and where your finances are. You'd work to that, and you can't have anything added or taken away.
Okay, and my answer to that, without being political, is that depends on the settlement, the finances, and the budgets, and I shall leave it at that. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is feedback on any scrutiny activities. Well, we have none at the moment, so we'll just move forward on that one. And any other business deemed urgent by myself, I have none. Just thank you all again for your excellent participation in this scrutiny. I really do appreciate it. And as your chair, I think you do an immense job. I said that to you at the latter end of last year when we were moving into this forward work plan as well. I really do appreciate it. And Jane, on record, I appreciate all your support as well. Diolch. Have a lovely evening.